Mr. President, gas prices this summer easily could be triple what they were when President Bush took office. The dramatic increase in oil prices brought prices for food up along with it, and families are facing a painful financial choice when it comes time to fill up their gas tank or put a gallon of gas in the car or put a gallon of milk on the kitchen table. When Americans are paying this much to fill their gas tanks, it's a drain on the whole economy. Businesses are cutting jobs, families have already eliminated non-essentials, and many are now cutting back on meals. And some people are even contemplating, I have to change my job because I can't afford the gas to get to where I work. It's become painfully clear that we are in an oil crisis. Now, some of the forces driving up prices are beyond immediate control, like the demands from China and India, but some of the factors offer opportunities for action. First, market experts have testified before Congress that speculators are driving up prices far beyond where the natural forces of supply and demand should take them. And second, we can take steps in this country to reduce our demand and our dependence on foreign oil. Last week in the United States Senate, Democrats brought legislation forward that would attack some of the root causes of the skyrocketing price of oil, cut down gas prices that are artificially high, and bring relief to drivers at the pump. That bill, the Consumer First Energy Act, would have provided that relief by doing, among other things, ensuring that our commodities markets are functioning fairly so prices can come down from their artificial highs. The supply and demand equation is roughly the same as it was 2 years ago, and yet we have seen prices go through the roof. Experts say that speculation could be adding anywhere between $50 and $80 a barrel to the price of oil. And in some respects, I'm not surprised that this is the one place of the market that doesn't seem to be regulated. We can see what happened under the administration of a president and vice president whose politics have always been tied up with the oil companies they used to work for. Here you have the price of a barrel of oil that has risen from about $20 a barrel when President Bush took office to about $140 a barrel right now. And as we've seen that price rise, what happens? As the price of oil has risen, the profits of big oil companies have risen again, from about $20 billion when President Bush took office to about $120 billion right now. Price of oil goes up, profits go up as well. And as the profits have risen for big oil, the price of gas we pay at the pump has risen from under $1.50 a gallon when President Bush took office, in many cases, to some cases over $4 per gallon right now. Now, the Consumer First Energy Act would have made sure that oil is traded on a well-regulated, transparent market free from manipulation. But my colleagues on the Republican side of the aisle said no to that legislation. They said no to the American consumer because they obviously feel committed to say yes to big oil. Now, yesterday, the Senate once again had the chance to help free our country from the liquid shackles of foreign oil. The Baucus substitute amendment that would have been offered had we been able to proceed, had not been stopped by our Republican colleagues, would have spurred the development of renewable energy by providing almost $20 billion in tax incentives of investment in the production, transportation, and conservation of energy. In order to encourage renewable energy industries to build to the scale we need them to, we have to send renewable producers the clear message that their product will have continued support in the future. So the bill would have extended investment tax credits for 6 years to ensure the continued development of solar energy, fuel cells, microturbines, among others. We've seen how important this is in my home state of New Jersey, where the solar industry has created thousands of jobs and helped green the Garden State. The bill would have encouraged the production of cellulosic biofuels, including cellulosic ethanol. It would have encouraged the development and use of biodiesel and renewable diesel, encourage further investments in advanced technology vehicles, and create a tax credit for alternative refueling stations so that the infrastructure exists in our country to make those vehicles viable. So in the face of a broad-based package to encourage new green energy sources that would have helped bring down gas prices and end our dependence on foreign oil, what did my colleagues on the Republican side of the aisle say? They said no again. Republicans said no to helping American consumers because they couldn't help but say yes to big oil. Now, it's no surprise then when my distinguished colleague from Arizona, Senator McCain, delivered his big energy speech yesterday. Where did he do it? He did it from the oil capital of the United States. The big plan President Bush and his Republican allies in Congress are pushing is just another example of big oil writing our energy policy as they have done for the last 8 years. And Senator McCain repeats it. That plan comes down to one thing: drilling, drilling, drilling along the coasts of our country. Now, when John McCain or George Bush talk about opening up our coastline to drilling, they make it sound like gasoline is going to jump right out from that drill, straight out of the ground and right into your car. What they either don't want to tell the public or simply ignore is that, in fact, it will take at least a decade to see any production out of those areas, and even then, the Energy Information Department tells us there will be a drop in the bucket. Now, why give the oil companies another handout when they are sitting on 68 million acres of land leased from the American people that they have yet to explore? I find it hard to believe that Senator McCain would say the federal government discourages offshore oil production when more than 80% of the oil that is off our shores is already open for production, and oil companies own more than 30 million acres of leases in federal waters that they have not used. The vast majority of oil and natural gas resources on federal land is already open for drilling, and it's not being tapped. Currently, oil companies are not producing oil or gas on 68 million of the more than 91 million acres of federal land under their control. 31 million of those 68 million acres is offshore. Offshore, these companies are producing on only about 20% of the acres they hold, while onshore they're producing less than 30% of the acres they hold. So you've got to wonder, when big oil pushes relentlessly for more and more land and water to drill, even when they have millions of acres that they have yet to use, it makes us wonder if they're not just exploiting this oil crisis to expand the reserves on their books in order to inflate their share price. Certainly the needs of American consumers are not what these CEOs are looking for. If the Senate doesn't act, billions of dollars worth of research and development tax credits will expire, impeding, innovation and discovery. And as the world becomes increasingly globalized and technology-driven, we must increase our investments in research and development in order to maintain our position as a world leader in the 21st century. If the Senate doesn't act, billions of dollars invested in alternative clean sources of energy will cease, and so will our progress to become energy independent. And I've heard my colleagues from the other side of the aisle decry the rising price of gas and talk about developing alternative sources of energy, but when they had the opportunity yesterday, once again they said no, as they said no last week on having market speculation taken out of the price of oil and therefore the price of gas. And, by the way, what would have been offered yesterday had we been able to proceed, and hopefully we can proceed on today, is that millions of Americans subject to the alternative minimum tax, placing unfair and unnecessary tax increases from middle-class families, could have gotten a break under the Baucus substitute. That's all what would have been able to happen. Finally, Mr. President, here's the bigger picture. We have 2% of the world's oil reserves, and we consume 25% of the world's oil. We're never going to meet growing domestic demand with shrinking domestic supply. The only way to make those numbers balance is to reduce our dependence on oil by increasing production of renewable fuels.